Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the STEM Space. Today, I have two fabulous guests joining me today. They are from the Alliance for Decision Education. And before we jump into the conversation, I felt like this was such an important topic for STEM teachers. And if you think about when we're putting on a STEM challenge and we're having kids say they're designing a catapult or a bridge or a roller coaster, they're making so many different decisions, but we're not often intentionally thinking about how do we scaffold those decisions? How are they deciding on the materials? How are they deciding about the impact of that design on the customer or on the environment? We often throw words around in engineering design about optimization and making science-based decisions. What does that mean? How do we help teach decisions and good decision making? And so we're going to talk about it today. So joining me is Ali and Ramin. Thank you both for being here today on the STEM Space.
Thank you so much. Great to be here.
All right, so we're going to jump right into what your organization is all about, which is decision education. So can you give me more about what does that mean to you and what is motivating this need for a whole alliance behind decision education?
Sure. So decision education is the teaching and learning of better decision making. So there's a large body of decision science research out there, really the science of how to make better decisions that pulls from psychology and neuroscience and different fields. And what we're trying to do is distill the biggest lessons and learnings from that and bring it to K through 12 youth so that it can help them now and in the future as they become adults. So they learn a variety of skills. It ranges from how to structure decisions, how to think about critically and rationally about different situations you're in, considering different outcomes, resisting cognitive biases. So there's a lot of different skills and dispositions that make up decision education.
And what is your organization doing with all of this? Like, what is the work that you're focused on?
So we are really coming at that. We are what we call field builders. So we are really hoping to work with others who have similar goals and interests around bringing decision-making skills to students, so that it's part of the K-12 landscape, just like many other fields, including STEM. And we think that integrating into what teachers and schools are already doing is really the way to do it. As a former classroom teacher myself, we all know how busy everybody's plates are and that there's really not a lot of room for more or extra, but we really see decision education as something that can really enhance and elevate what is already happening in content areas in K-12 education. So we have created the first set of K-12 learning standards for decision education, which helps educators know what students should know and be able to do with regards to decision-making skills from K through 12. We are piloting a number of programs that we are sometimes co-designing with schools around how to bring decision education to their students around big issues like college and career decision-making or media literacy and decision-making. We also are working on building some digital curricular tools to help teachers more seamlessly bring DE into the classroom. And that's sort of the education side of things. But we also really know that a lot of people are not familiar with what decision-making skills are, or when they hear the word decision education, they're kind of interested, but they're like, what is that? And so a lot of our work is around building the ecosystem around K-12 schools. So working with policymakers, working with partnered organizations, working with researchers in the field to really help us build the knowledge base about what does decision-making in youth and adolescents really look like, building awareness of the term decision education. So we're really coming at it from like a 360 view. I think, it's a lot.
Yeah. What's your background in teaching? I'm curious.
I was a classroom teacher for about 10 years. I started as a middle school Spanish teacher, and then I was a 3rd and 4th grade teacher for the rest of my time in the classroom. And then I was an instructional coach, and I supervised instructional coaches for about another 8 or so years. I live in Philadelphia, worked really closely with teachers and leaders in the school district of Philadelphia and surrounding areas. So I have probably, as a coach, worked with K through 12 teachers, and as a teacher with K through 8. And I've been here at the Alliance for about 4 years now.
And Ramin, what's your background and how long have you been with the group?
Yeah, so I've been with the Alliance almost 10 years now. I'm one of the first few hires, and I've seen it grow from, I think I was the fourth hire to 35 or 40 now. But my background's actually pretty different. I was a corporate attorney for about 4 years, and then moved over to the educational nonprofit space. I ran a small nonprofit in Cincinnati that worked with homeless youth. And then when we moved back to Philadelphia, I was interested in staying in the educational nonprofit space. I wasn't familiar with decision education or decision science, but it was one of those missions that the more I learned, the more bought in I became, and I've been here, ever since.
And I would love to hear more of like, there's got to be a reason why you're doing this work, right? Is there something like in your background or something you're like, this is so important, and I'm, leaving that field to go work in nonprofit?
Yeah, I can start there. I realized pretty early on that I wanted to do mission-driven work, and then within mission-driven work, I really was drawn to the education initiatives. And when I first learned about decision education, I thought it was really niche, and I was like, okay, helping youth with decisions, that's interesting. I haven't heard of that. And then the more I thought about it, you realize it's sort of the opposite of niche in some ways. It's like all we do in life is make decisions about a variety of personal and professional and financial and health. And we often say, our outcomes, they come down to luck, which we don't really have control over, or our choices, which you can put yourself in the best position to have a good outcome by making, comprehensive, informed decisions. So the more I thought about it, and, we often say if even everyone was 5% better at making decisions, you think about the ripple effects of that. If every teacher, every superintendent, every policymaker, politician, every parent, there's so much potential for how this can impact our different outcomes personally, financially, academically, et cetera.
Yeah, and I would say for me, as a teacher, I think what really was central to my practice was centering student voices, student experiences, helping students really construct their learning in authentic ways. And something that really drew me to decision education is that it doesn't teach students what to think. It's really about how to think, and it really centers the values of the decision maker. So it helps students get really clear on what they care about in any given decision. And those can be big capital V values, or it could be, small things like I want to get my homework done quickly instead of procrastinating. It could be big things or small things. And it's going to be different. The same decision, the values in a decision are going to be different depending on the person who's making the decision. So I was really drawn to the way that it really, really centers who the decision makers are, what they care about, and helping them see about like, what do they care about more in a given decision, and how can they then make choices that align with the things that they care about in their life, in learning, in their relationships. So that was very appealing to me. And then, of course, like Ramin said, I didn't really know much about decision-making skills myself. When I came to the Alliance and started learning and was like, holy moly, how have I made I don't know anything about decision-making. I've always thought I was a great decision maker, and I got here and I was like, nope, know nothing about any of this. And it's kind of like taking off the blinders. Like the more you learn about how our brain works and the ways that we have errors in our thinking and the things that we avoid looking at or don't know to look at, the more you just see like, wow, all of us are walking around without these skills. And just, think about how much better our outcomes would be if we had these skills. We would, if we could talk to each other with these skills in place and these dispositions. So, once I came in, I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I'm all in on this.
And what is really exciting about this work is I think we're, of course, teaching kids decision making, but in very implicit ways. Like they're watching how adults make decisions or how teachers make decisions. And it's so important to make it explicit, right? Like give them the tools. And I see the same thing happening with social and emotional skills, right? How do we help coach kids to work through emotions and to recognize them? And in going through STEM education, so maybe shifting here to like, how can teachers implement this in their classroom? There's not much out there to help teachers help kids make decisions in a design challenge or in a STEM classroom. But that is actually where I could see your standards and the resources you're providing could really be integrated into a STEM classroom, because often we don't have standards. We have a lot of flexibility in a STEM classroom, in a STEM elective or a technology class. So what can teachers do that are out there listening and they're like, I love this, but what can I do to bring it into my classroom?
Yeah, there are so many ways to bring it in. And one of the things we want to do is really like support the field by making it easy for teachers to figure out how to do that. And so those are some of the things we're working on with our curricular tools and our the standards, of course, and with the prototypes that we're building in co-design with schools. But on a more general level, just to speak about it here, there's so many, even just small ways. Like we are so wired to think of like, I'm deciding between this or that. Right. And so even just the act of like, is there a third alternative? So if you think you're deciding between this and that, is there a way to combine those? Is there a way to do something totally different? So small ways in which we can really just broaden the options that we're considering, whether it's in a science unit or when we're predicting outcomes. I think some of the skills around probabilistic thinking and how to use tools of probability to help us navigate uncertain outcomes is extremely relevant to the STEM space because we're making predictions about things that we really don't, there's so much uncertainty. And, especially when you're making decisions about things that apply to the real world, as is so often the case with STEM, the world is constantly changing. So how can you feel confident making predictions in an uncertain world? So those are some of the things. I also think there are a lot of just pedagogical ways in which teachers can bring decision education to the classroom. For example, we talk about recognizing and resisting cognitive biases. One really common bias is anchoring. So, you sort of get anchored on the first piece of information that you hear, whether it's a data point, a number, a quantity, or in the case of in classrooms, it could be someone's idea. And so there's different pedagogy, like instead of having a whole group conversation to start, having students write their ideas down first, so they're not anchored on each other before they share. And then going back and updating your thinking. So calibrating your thinking as you learn new information is a really central part of decision education, something really easy to bring into really any classroom, especially a STEM class, since we're talking about STEM here, like, okay, you have this new data. How does that change your thinking? Are you more confident? Are you less confident? Is there more that you need to learn? So I think both in terms of content that can be woven in and teaching methods that can be woven in, there's a lot of really great ways for DE to enhance the amazing things teachers are already doing in STEM classrooms.
Yeah. And I'm writing the word anchoring because one of the things we tell teachers, don't show examples. They're just going to copy it. Like if you're going to do like a roller coaster, if you show them a project, everybody's going to do the same one. And now I have a term and I'm going to look up the research behind it because I don't know why. I just felt like that was the thing to do. And so I think that's really helpful.
You've seen it happen. You've seen it happen with students. You know that this is what they do. And adults do it too.
And the idea also about data-driven decisions. And so why are you using that material? Why did you put in this turn here? There's data behind it. So kids often just throw stuff in a project and they're like, I'm done, it works. And they can't explain why. And so we've been really pushing our STEM teachers to think about how can kids collect data and then analyze that data and make comparisons. Often they're working on just like one model. So catapults, right? They build one thing, they keep testing it, they're iterating. But you brought up this idea of maybe there's a second way to do it. So looking at multiple solutions and then comparing between those solutions. I mean, that just seems so intuitive, but often we're not doing it, right? We're just like throwing kids in the challenge and like figure it out. Make some decisions, right? And so let me switch here now to digital decisions. So Ramin, let's talk about maybe the decisions that kids are making every day in the digital space. And they're often not taught in school how to handle all these daily decisions and this idea of digital literacy.
Yeah, I think it's a great example in this day and age, and it's only becoming more acute with AI and social media and all of that. One of the big taglines I use with my own children who are between ages 6 and 12 is, not all screen time is created equal. And I think our society often misses the nuance and views it as a black and white, technology and screens are bad, or AI is bad, or social media is bad, or whatever the case is. And, there's a lot of nuance there. And I think it comes down to thinking about your goals and what's important to you, as Ali said before, and figuring out which screen time activities help facilitate those goals and which don't, and for each student, that's a unique answer. We're not coming in here saying, don't do this, don't do that, or do this. And so, obviously there's school-based screen time, which is one thing, but even within your recreational screen time, to me, there's a big difference between, a family movie night where you're watching a movie together and, someone scrolling on their phone during a dinner conversation, when they should be interacting with their peers or with their family. And so, and then obviously social media comes with certain risks that maybe watching TV doesn't, and so I think that's been a really interesting thing. And one interesting tension I've noticed recently in conversations with parents of similar age children as mine is, you simultaneously hear my kids are on screens all the time, but then also my kids have so many activities and I'm just rushing them between sports and music and dance and all that stuff. And it's really interesting to think about how both of those could be happening at the same time. And, maybe there is a role for screen time. If a student has been at soccer practice and then went to ballet and then did X, Y, and Z, maybe it is good to have 20 minutes where they can relax a little bit. But if that's coming at the expense of things that matter to them or matter to their families, it's a different story.
Yeah. And so now whenever we started the conversation, I was trying to think like, where does this decision making fit? And it's just like, the more you're talking, I'm like, it's in everything. Like as a parent, all the decisions I'm making, and like with social media and then like the foods they eat and the car I drive. And it just feels like it is in everything that we're doing every day. And so what is your hope with the Alliance? Are you trying to, like, I guess where are you trying to make the impact? Are you trying to primarily focus on the student side and working with schools and teachers? Are you also trying to help more of like general public awareness? Because the other issue I see in technology is we are overwhelmed with information as a consumer. It's just nonstop and it's almost paralyzing. I can't make a decision because there's too many decisions to make. And so I feel like there's so much space here for you to work in. Like you're not going to run out of a job, basically. So I guess where is your focus? I'll start from Ali.
Yeah, our mission is to get decision education skills to as many children, youth as we can. So we are a little bit agnostic in terms of how to do that. And we, in true, I think, decision science fashion, are like experimenting with a lot of different ways. We have one hypothesis that going through schools is a great way to do that because most kids are in schools. And so if we can get decision education into schools, integrated into their existing classrooms, as well as, there's ways that it can be part of the counseling at the school, the way the decisions are made at school, the way students are brought into decision making at school, then we know we can reach a lot of students. But we also know if there are ways to reach a lot of young people in really meaningful ways that are outside of school, that we'll do that too. Or instead, so we will update our thinking as we learn more about what the best way to get these skills to young people are. I think ideally we want to get, we would love for adults to also get these skills, but our focus really is the K-12 space. And I think one of the things that we think is really important about it is that students, young people really understand explicitly when they're like how decision making plays a role in their lives. And that includes big, intentional, explicit decisions. It also includes things like habits, right? Like all the automatic things we're doing every day. Those are also decisions. And there's ways that we can interrupt the habit loops that cue us to certain decisions. So, empowering students, to go back to Ramin's point about the digital discipline, empowering students to know, like, I actually don't want to get on the screen now, but I'm in this loop where, like, every time I come home, I just hop on my device because it's habitual now. So, like, do I have any power over that? Like, is there any way I could, like, change some things in my environment, right? Like, maybe store my devices away from the front door so it's not the first thing I go to, so things like that. I think, we really want young people to be, just aware and have a little bit of metacognitive skills around how decisions are part of every moment of their life.
Yeah, I love that. Ramin, I'm going to ask you the last question is, what else do you want teachers to know about decision education? Are there maybe any misconceptions or something they don't really understand about it?
Yeah, it's a great question. I can see how someone might think, are we telling people how to make or what decisions to make? And that is not the case at all. As we've been talking about, it's really about a skill set, a framework, to equip students so that they can handle whatever it is that they need to handle. And then I think also the point that it's really just a way to enhance and elevate what you're doing already versus it being, an additional thing that you need to learn. It really has such potential to impact students' lives now and in the future. And what we found from teachers is that they've really enjoyed learning about it as well. And as you found already, Natasha, once you start thinking this way, even just in a short conversation, it's hard to not, at least take a different lens to all the decisions you're making throughout your life. So what a gift if we can give that to kids early on.
Yeah. So maybe I should rethink waking up and scrolling on my phone every morning as like something I can actually control. No, this was great. Thank you so much, Allie. I see you have something to say. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think one other like common misconception that's really hard for everybody is that the quality of a decision is not determined by the outcome necessarily, because there are lots of ways in which chance influences the outcome of a decision. And chance can be lots of things. Could be the time you were born, where you live, the other driver sneezes when you're crossing like there's so many things we do not have control over. And so just because you get an undesirable outcome does not mean it was a bad decision. Just because you have a great outcome doesn't mean it was a good decision. And so I think that's something where we are really hoping to shift people's thinking, where it's don't just look at what happened, but look at what went into making the decision, because over time we can learn lessons from that. And, on average, get closer to the outcomes that we care about.
Yeah.
But
I
it's
love
hard.
that.
It's hard
Right.
to do that.
Right. And I think it's so important that I love that you're starting with kids, even as young as like my, 4-year-old, and helping her just think through basic decisions and why she's doing it. And like your point of just because you made a decision, you're not guaranteed an outcome, is hard to explain to a 4-year-old, but you're starting to like build this confidence in them, and then these skills that are going to help them for the rest of their lives. So I feel like I could talk about this with you guys for even longer, and I might have to bring you back. And I just really appreciate you both joining me today.
Thank you
Thanks
so much.
This was great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.